At 11:02 on the morning of August 9th, 1945, Tsutomu Yamaguchi was standing inside an office in Nagasaki, trying to convince his boss that a single bomb had destroyed most of Hiroshima. His boss reportedly thought the story was impossible. Then the room turned completely white. Yamaguchi immediately recognized the flash. He dropped beneath a desk moments before the windows shattered and debris flew through the office. He knew exactly what had happened, because just 3 days earlier, he had survived the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Now, a second atomic bomb had exploded over his own city. This sounds like one of those stories invented for the internet, but it really happened. Although Yamaguchi was not the only person believed to have experienced both bombings, he eventually became the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both. And his journey from Hiroshima to Nagasaki is almost impossible to imagine. In August 1945, Yamaguchi was 29 years old. He was a marine engineer working for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and normally lived in Nagasaki with his wife and young son. For the previous 3 months, however, his job had taken him to Hiroshima, where he and several colleagues were working on the design of an oil tanker. August 6th was supposed to be his final day there. He had completed the assignment, packed his belongings, and was preparing to return home. But while traveling toward the station, he reportedly realized that he had forgotten his personal identification seal. So he turned back. That small decision placed him outside near the Mitsubishi shipyard at approximately 8:15 that morning. Above Hiroshima, an American B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay was approaching the city. Yamaguchi heard the aircraft and looked into the sky. Then came a light so bright that it overwhelmed everything around him. He threw himself into a ditch, but the shockwave reached him moments later. The force reportedly lifted him from the ground and threw him through the air. When he regained consciousness, the clear morning had disappeared, dust and smoke had darkened the sky. His ears were ringing, he struggled to see, and burns covered parts of his face and upper body. The explosion had also damaged his hearing. Yamaguchi had been roughly 3 kilometers from the center of the blast. At that distance, surviving was possible, but far from guaranteed. He eventually made his way toward the Mitsubishi shipyard and found 2 colleagues who had also survived. The 3 men spent that night inside an air raid shelter, injured and surrounded by a city they could barely recognize. At this point, Yamaguchi still did not fully understand what kind of weapon had struck Hiroshima. What he understood was that he needed to return home. The following day, he and his colleagues began moving through the destroyed city toward the railway station. The journey forced them to see the scale of the disaster up close. Collapsed buildings, fires, severely injured survivors, and bodies in the streets and waterways. Somehow, the railway was still operating. Yamaguchi boarded a train filled with other burned and exhausted survivors and began the long journey back to Nagasaki. He arrived on August 8th. Instead of going directly home, he first sought medical treatment. His burns were so severe that people who knew him reportedly struggled to recognize him. He was eventually covered in bandages and allowed to return to his family. After everything he had seen, he had finally reached home, but he had unknowingly returned to the next target. The following morning, August 9th, Yamaguchi reported to the Mitsubishi office in Nagasaki. We should not assume that he calmly returned for an ordinary day of work. He was badly injured, bandaged, and still trying to understand what had happened. At the office, his colleagues gathered around him, surprised that he had returned from Hiroshima alive. Yamaguchi was then asked to explain the destruction he had witnessed. He told a company director that one bomb had produced the flash, blast, fire, and devastation that destroyed Hiroshima. The director reportedly struggled to believe him. How could a single bomb destroy an entire city? Then while Yamaguchi was still explaining it, the same white light appeared outside the office. At 11:02, an American B-29 named Boxcar dropped a plutonium bomb known as Fat Man over Nagasaki. This time, Yamaguchi immediately understood what the flash meant. He dropped beneath a desk before the shockwave struck the building. Windows broke. Glass and debris filled the office. Once again, Yamaguchi was approximately 3 kilometers from the center of a nuclear explosion. The bomb used over Nagasaki was more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima. But the surrounding hills and the reinforced structure of the office helped reduce the force that reached him. Somehow, he survived again without suffering the same level of immediate blast injury. But his first thought was not about the impossible odds he had just beaten, it was about his family. Yamaguchi rushed through the damaged city toward his home. Uncertain whether his wife and child were still alive, part of the house had been destroyed. But in another extraordinary twist, his wife had gone out looking for medicine to treat the burns he received in Hiroshima. When the bomb exploded, she and their child found protection inside a tunnel. The injuries Yamaguchi suffered at Hiroshima may indirectly have placed his family near the shelter when Nagasaki was bombed. All three survived. But surviving the explosions did not mean the danger had ended. In the days that followed, Yamaguchi developed a high fever and began vomiting. His hair fell out, and his wounds became dangerously infected. He and his family remained inside a shelter while the effects of radiation continued spreading through both cities. On August 15th, Japan announced its surrender. Yamaguchi was reportedly so ill that he could barely react to the news, yet he slowly recovered. In the years after the war, he worked as a translator, became a teacher, and later returned to Mitsubishi. He and his wife raised their family, while Yamaguchi wrote poetry as a way of processing what he had witnessed. For decades, however, he did not make his double survival the center of his public life. That changed as he became older. Yamaguchi began speaking more openly about Hiroshima and Nagasaki and became an advocate for the abolition of nuclear weapons. In 2006, at the age of 90, he traveled to New York and addressed the United Nations, explaining why he believed surviving both bombings had given him a responsibility to speak. Then, in 2009, the Japanese government officially recorded that he had been exposed to both atomic bombings. Other people are believed to have survived both attacks. Some of Yamaguchi's Mitsubishi colleagues were also present in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But Yamaguchi became the only person officially recognized by Japan as a survivor of both explosions. He died from stomach cancer in January 2010 at the age of 93. People sometimes describe Tsutomu Yamaguchi as the luckiest man in history, but lucky feels like an incomplete description. He survived two events that killed tens of thousands of people instantly and caused suffering that continued for generations. His survival was extraordinary, but what mattered most to him was not that he had escaped death twice. It was that he had lived long enough to tell the world exactly what he had seen.